Many people have heard the comments that Senator John McCain said in 1996 referring to the UFC as human cockfighting. Today, I'd like to talk to you about the rise and the fall of UFC President Dana White. I would also like to talk to you about how Dana White has changed the past, present, and future of UFC forever. Personally, I have trained in mixed martial arts for over 4 years, and I've also been a fan of the UFC for over 7. Let's start by taking a look at who Dana White is. Dana White was born July 28, 1969 in Manchester, Connecticut. He attended Boston College for 2 years before dropping out. Also, before he was president of the UFC, he was an aerobics instructor and an amateur boxer. Also, he was a manager for many amateur boxers and 2 future stars of the UFC, Tito Ortiz and Chuck Liddell. Let's take a look at how Dana White became president of the UFC. In 2001, Dana White noticed that the UFC was up for sale. He contacted his childhood friend Lorenzo Ferreras, and together they created a corporation called Zuffa LLC, in which Dana White is a 10% owner. In 2001, Zuffa LLC purchased the UFC for $2 million. Let's take a look at how Dana White changed the UFC. Dana White started by changing some of the rules involved with the UFC. Mainly, he changed the rule of no kicking a down opponent in the head, no striking to the back of the head, no striking of the spine, and also he changed that all fighters of the UFC have to have mandatory medical examinations before and after every fight. He also changed the slogan of the UFC from "No rules" to "As real as it gets," which made it a much more family-friendly environment for fans to watch. In 2005, Dana White took $10 million out of his own pocket to create a television show called The Ultimate Fighter, in which he paid for all the production and airing of the entire first season. Since then, The Ultimate Fighter is now in season 7, and every week gets over 2 million viewers of the show Ultimate Fighter, and is the #1 rated show on Spike TV. Let's take a look at the future of the UFC through the leadership of Dana White. Dana White is working hard to become sanctioned in every state that has an athletic commission in the United States. He's also taking the UFC worldwide. He's working on fights in Mexico, Canada, and in Europe. He's also trying to get the biggest and best fighters from around the world. From every organization, he's trying to get them to come to the UFC to fight. He's also buying smaller corporations and incorporating them and all their fighters into the UFC. In 2001, the UFC had an estimated net worth of $2 million. Current estimates for the UFC's net worth are over $1 billion due to the leadership and knowledge of the fighting world through President Dana White. I would like to review some of the main points of my speech. By changing the image of the UFC, Dana White has made MMA into the fastest growing sport in the nation. And I think it's amazing how one man has forever changed how the world views MMA and the UFC. So from now on, how will you look at the UFC? As a barbaric blood sport, or as a sport filled with highly competitive athletes?